So you're saying to me, as a concerned citizen, you will go to the Supreme Court on the grounds that one nation, one election breaches the federal structure of the Constitution and therefore violates the basic structure. On those grounds, you will go to the Supreme Court.
Yes, I will.
And you're confident you think you can succeed?
If I were not confident, why would I go?
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. The Prime Minister claims one nation, one election will make India's democracy more vibrant and participative. It will cut the cost of elections and improve governance. But is that really the case? Or could it convert our federal structure into a unitary structure and thus violate the basic structure of the Indian Constitution? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with the former professor and dean of the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad and a founding member of the Association for Democratic Reforms, Jagdeep Chhokar. Professor Chhokar, I want to focus this interview on the desirability of one nation, one election. The Prime Minister has claimed that it will make India's democracy more vibrant and participative. How do you respond to that statement?
I don't think it will make India's democracy more vibrant and participative. As a matter of fact, to the contrary, it will make it less participative and less vibrant. The reason being that if a state assembly election are held when they are due according to the electoral rhythm of that state, then they are not held with anything else. Of course, unless it happens that they fall due when the Lok Sabha elections are due. But a state assembly has an independent existence under the Constitution. There's a chapter called the Union and there's a chapter called the States. So state assemblies have an independent existence. The state population has an independent set of concerns about the governance of the state. So when that is going to be included with these national concerns, the participation of the population of the state in the governance of the states will reduce.
And I'll come to all the issues you raise in a moment's time, but first, for the sake of the audience, I'll underline you not only disagree with the Prime Minister, you actually are contradicting what he says quite explicitly. You're saying one nation, one election will make India's democracy not more vibrant, but less vibrant, and it won't make it participative, it'll make it less participative. You contradict him completely.
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's then look at the reasons why people advocate one nation, one election. After that, I'll come for the reasons against one nation, one election. There are two reasons why people seem to advocate one nation, one election. First, there's no doubt that elections every 5 years is a lot cheaper than multiple elections at different times. But in an essay that you wrote in 2018, you say the Prime Minister has claimed that political parties alone spent 30,000 crore on national elections. And you believe this is a hugely exaggerated figure. Can you start by explaining why you think it's exaggerated?
Actually, if you read the fine print of that essay, I am saying that the Prime Minister says political parties spend, no, the government or the election commission spends 30,000, whereas S.Y. Qureshi says the election commission spends about 4,500 crores. Political parties estimate is actually an estimate made by the Center for Media Studies is 60,000 crores. So political parties' expenditure will not be reduced by the one nation, one election. The only possible expense that can be reduced, which is also very unlikely based on estimates given out by former election commissioners, will also increase by the election commission's expense will increase and political parties' expense will certainly not decrease.
So you're saying two very important things. First, you're saying, quoting Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, that actually the election commission only spends 4,500.
Yes.
Secondly, you're saying that figure of 30,000 is actually not the actual figure because political parties may be spending close to 60,000. And then the third thing you're saying is what political parties spend will not be reduced or diminished just because you have one nation, one election, because they will still be spending that amount. So the Prime Minister is wrong on both counts.
Yes, he is. Political parties do not spend only during the election. They spend round the year, all over the 5 years. The advertisements that I see in Delhi of Tamil Nadu and Telangana and Assam, full page ads in the newspapers every day, that is actually election expense, if you look at it.
But the important point is that as opposed to the Prime Minister's figure of 30,000 crore for a national election, you're saying S.Y. Qureshi, the former CEC, Chief Election Commissioner, who should know what he's talking about, he said that in fact the Election Commission only spends 4,500, which is a fraction of the amount the Prime Minister claimed.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, now in this connection, Shashi Tharoor and Praveen Chakravarti have calculated that one nation, one election would only save less than 5,000 crore a year. For an economy of India's size, which according to the latest estimates is 326 lakh crore, which makes it the fifth largest economy in the world, is 5,000 crore a determining factor or is it just a small concern?
Two issues. One, it is a small fraction, but the more important issue on this expenditure business is, are we looking for the cheapest possible democracy or are we looking for a very effective or a functioning democracy? I mean, it appalls me to hear this argument that money should be saved on elections, which is the only way to operationalize a democracy. And if we want to have the cheapest possible democracy, then I am afraid we do not deserve to be called a democracy. Putting a monetary value on democracy is absolutely abhorrent to me.
So you're saying to judge a democracy by the cost of elections is as if you are looking for the cheapest democracy. What India should be looking for is the most effective democracy, not the cheapest.
That is what I think. But the rest of the world seems to think that we should have the cheapest democracy. The cheapest democracy will be to take it to the illogical extreme, not to have elections at all. We have a government and the government keep working and there'll be no money. And then this dichotomy that is put across is that the money saved from conducting elections can be used for development. Are democracy and development mutually contradictory? In my opinion, no.
In fact, let's come at this point to the second reason why people support one nation, one election. It's that the restrictions of the Model Code of Conduct will only apply for a limited period, thus permitting politicians to devote themselves to governance. But in your essay, that essay of 2018 that I referred to earlier, you argue that the Model Code of Conduct does not hold up governance. Can you explain why you've come to the conclusion that the Model Code of Conduct does not hold up governance? That is the exact opposite position taken by the Prime Minister, taken by the BJP, taken by the BJP supporters. So can you explain that more fully?
The simplest way of understanding what the Model Code of Conduct does or cannot do is to read the Model Code of Conduct. Anybody who says, and I say this with full responsibility, anybody who says that the Model Code of Conduct prevents governmental or governance activity has not read the Model Code of Conduct. All the Model Code of Conduct says is the government in power cannot introduce any new development schemes which may have an impact on the result of the election. So number one, development schemes which may not have any impact on the election can be introduced. Number two, new development schemes which even may have an impact on the election results, the government can seek election commission's approval. And there are many instances in the past the approval has been given. Number three, which is the biggest elephant in the room, existing schemes of development and governance are not prohibited. The existing work is supposed to go on. Model code of conduct does not prevent the government from doing what it has been doing. But the irony of the situation is our political leaders wake up just about 6 months before the election, when they think of all the schemes that they should have done for over 4.5 years, and they want to do it the day the election is announced or it is about to be announced.
But the key point you're making, and I'm repeating because I think it's so important, is that the model code of conduct does not stop existing schemes from continuing. It doesn't pull them up. It does not stop new schemes that don't impact on the election. And even new schemes which do impact on the election can still happen with the permission of the ECI. So the argument presented by the Prime Minister and his supporters and his party, that the model code of conduct holds up development, holds up governance, is complete, let me use a colloquial term, baloney.
Well, it is not correct.
It is not correct.
Yes.
Let me point out something else. Even to the very limited extent to which some governance might slow down, not held up, but slow down, surely the model code of conduct only applies nationwide when there's a national election. When there are state elections, it only applies statewide, and the statewide application surely is not a major hindrance, even for in terms of slowing down development or slowing down governance.
I see no reason why it should.
So this argument presented by the Prime Minister is completely fallacious.
I think so.
Okay. So to sum up the two main reasons why people propose one nation, one election, would you agree that elections, A, should not be judged by their cost, unless you want the cheapest democracy, which clearly we don't? And secondly, elections should not be judged by the conduct required for their fair implementation, because that conduct simply makes for proper moral behavior, ethical behavior. It doesn't hold up governance. So on both counts, those arguments are wrong.
Yes, they are, because a lot of people say the model code of conduct is actually a moral code of conduct. But unfortunately, morality is not an issue which is discussed very often these days.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Okay, Professor Chhokar, let's now come to the arguments against one nation, one election. So far, we've talked about and dismissed both arguments in favor. Let's now come to the arguments against. First, does one nation, one election contradict the character of our country? We are definitely not one nation, one religion. We are not one nation, one language. We are not one nation, one culture. Instead, we are a union of states where our differences constitute our richness and our wealth. They make us special, they make us significant. Does one nation, one election detract from that?
The way one nation, one election has been interpreted, it certainly does. As a matter of fact, I make a case that we actually have a one nation, one election. We have one parliament and we have one election for the parliament. We have 29 states and we have 29 elections for the states. So, one nation, one election, the phrase has been misinterpreted, whether by mistake or deliberately, I do not know. But there is one nation, one election already. But we want to make 32 plus 4,000 panchayats into one election. which is not the nation. Every panchayat is a different entity, every state is a different entity, and they have their own rhythm of elections. And
So
therefore,
this concept of one nation, one election as a dummy by the Prime Minister is conflating different separate entities into one. It's conflating
yes.
state assemblies into the National Assembly, and it's conflating panchayats into state assemblies into the National Assembly. In other words, it's treating different entities as if they were the same, and that's the wrong thing to do.
And it is impossible to do. You cannot mix not only apples and oranges, but you can't mix fruits and vegetables and minerals. This is that kind of situation that we are facing.
Secondly, does one nation, one election run the risk of prioritizing national issues over state level or local issues? And if it does it have a tendency of converting a federal structure into a unitary structure?
Absolutely. There are studies, and I have written a paper along with Sanjay Kumar in the Hindu several years ago, and we have given data to show that when state assembly and parliament elections are held together, there is a tendency on the part of voters to vote for national issues. Therefore, state issues will become subservient and to some extent get totally neglected if the state assembly elections are held with the parliament elections.
So state assembly issues will become either totally subsumed or they will be neglected if state assembly elections are held alongside the national election.
Yes.
Does that mean that under one nation, one election, the campaign in small states like, for example, Goa, Sikkim, Himachal, or many of the small states of the Northeast would get drowned out by the campaign at the national level? No one will listen to their concerns. There'll be no time for them. The papers and TV will have no space for them.
And some major campaigners will not even go there. Today, when a state assembly election happens, the entire national leadership of every party descends on that state, which of course is wrong in my opinion, but at least the state gets some attention. In that case, the smaller states will get no attention whatsoever.
In other words, what you're saying is that when one nation, one election happens, people like the Prime Minister and Amit Shah will be so involved in ensuring a majority for themselves at the Lok Sabha level that they won't have time and they won't bother to visit places like Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, or even for that matter, Himachal, Goa, Sikkim.
Yes, that is right. But let me add, nor will Rahul Gandhi or Akhilesh Yadav.
The major leaders simply won't go to the smaller states.
Yes, yes.
Now, in your essay, the essay of 2018 that I've read many times, you argue that for all the reasons we've discussed, one nation, one election would breach the federal structure of our constitution. And if it does so, it would therefore violate the basic structure. How certain are you of this point?
Well, I am absolutely certain. The basic structure doctrine, which is unique to India, was given by a 13-judge bench in a 7-6 decision. It was such a complicated issue. But the Supreme Court, a 13 bench in a majority judgment, said the parliament has the right to amend the constitution under, I think it is Article 358, but it does not have the right to amend the basic structure of the constitution. And what constitutes basic structure was given by all the judges in that judgment, and it has been subsequently supplemented by several other Supreme Court judgments. But the concept of federal character of the constitution figures in every list of the constituents of the basic structure. So federal character of the constitution cannot be trifled with even by the parliament. And I am, in my limited judgment and knowledge, I am absolutely certain it will be held to be violative. And in a meeting with the Law Commission, when I was asked this question by one of the members, that if all political parties agree to do one nation, one election, what will you say? I said, I will still go to court to challenge it, because election is not the sole preserve of the political parties or politicians. Citizens have a role in the election, and I, as a concerned citizen, will certainly oppose this, and Supreme Court will have to take a call on this.
So you're saying to me, as a concerned citizen, you will go to the Supreme Court on the grounds that one nation, one election breaches the federal structure of the Constitution and therefore violates the basic structure. On those grounds, you will go to the Supreme Court.
Yes, I will.
And you're confident you think you can succeed.
If I were not confident, why would I go?
Now, there are two further points, Professor Chhokar, that I would like to put to you about one nation, one election. First, at a time when parliamentary elections are increasingly becoming presidential, is there a danger one nation, one election can exacerbate this trend and thus push our multi-party system towards becoming a one-party state? Is that a credible fear?
It is absolutely credible. And this tendency was visible even when Mrs. Indira Gandhi got a big majority in the parliament. And there was a gentleman by the name Devkant Barua who said Indira is India and India is Indira. At that time also, there was a move towards a presidential form of government. And this is nothing but a backdoor method of trying to do that. I have nothing against the presidential form of government. If the party in power or the parties want a presidential form of government, they should come out with that proposal up front, and that proposal needs to be discussed in the country at large. And if the country chooses to go in for a presidential form of government, so be it. I have no problem. But to do it with a sleight of hand is unacceptable.
Secondly, under one nation, one election, whenever a government collapses for whatever reason, fresh elections will be held only for the remaining part of the 5-year term. But since all the reasons for early elections that exist today will continue to exist under one nation, one election, the truth is governments will continue to fall and early elections will continue to be held. The only difference is that the new government will serve a truncated term. Seen in that light, does one nation, one election make any real difference at all? In fact, you could conceivably end up with more elections rather than less.
See, this is absolutely correct, but my suspicion, I have no data to back this. My suspicion is that the government in power also knows this is not going to happen. This started in 2014 when the BJP put it in their election manifesto. And from 2014 to 2018, I myself addressed 26 seminars across the country on this issue. And after 2018, things seemed to quieten down. Then all of a sudden in 2023, we had a committee headed by a former president, which itself is a unique event. And now we have this. And even if you look at the calendar announced by the minister in the press thing when the cabinet approved it, there has to be first a bill drafted, amending 5 or 6 articles of the Constitution, which will not be a simple job. Then this bill has to be passed with 2/3 majority in parliament. It may go to a parliamentary committee. Then it has to be approved by 50% of the states. Then it will go to the president. And once the president assents, I dare say it will go to the Supreme Court. So the government knows it will not happen. This is a thing that we should all discuss about so that we don't worry about other stuff. This happened in 2014 to 18. It will now happen from 2024 to 2029, and nothing will happen.
You're making a very important point that the practicalities of getting one nation, one election passed almost clearly suggest that it's not going to happen. But let me come back to the paradox you agreed with. You're actually agreeing that one nation, one election, which is intended to reduce the number of elections, could conceivably end up increasing them. It could end up doing exactly the opposite of what it purports to do.
If it happens, my contention is it will not happen.
Let me pick up on something that you mentioned fairly detailed term in your essay of 2019. You believe one nation, one election is an obsession of the Prime Minister rather than a credible response to a genuine problem. In other words, the PM and through the PM, the PMO has been pushing this with parliamentary committees, with the Election Commission. Periodically, it's been writing to them to raise the issue. You made that point very comprehensively in your essay. Can you briefly sum it up for the audience?
You see, there are several events which are seemingly unconnected. But when you list them out chronologically, as I have done, they show that every couple of months or 3-4 months, something emanates from the Prime Minister's office, which pushes this idea a little further. And the most blatant, if I may use that word, was what was reported in the Indian Express by a lady called Ritika Kheda in 2015 January. It seems the then Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. H.S. Brahma, recorded a note on file that the Prime Minister's Special Secretary, Mr. Nripendra Mishra, called Mr. Brahma to say that there is a feeling in the country that elections are happening too frequently and they cost money, and the Election Commission should do something about that. Now, for somebody from the Prime Minister's office to call the Chief Election Commissioner is constitutionally improper, to say the least. It was very nice of Mr. Brahma to have recorded this note on file, and he proved that he is a true bureaucrat who does not keep anything in his mind or in his heart. He puts it down on paper. So Prime Minister's involvement in this issue, this was just one instance. There are many that I listed that in my essay. So there is no doubt. It seems to me that whether, I can't say it is his soul or he is the only one pushing it, but he is certainly pushing it.
Finally, Professor Chhokar, in an article that Yogendra Yadav wrote for the Indian Express on Tuesday, the 24th, that's just 48 hours ago, Yogendra Yadav said, one nation, one election is a solution in search of a problem. He said it's a remedy in search of a disease. To what extent do you agree with that rather humorous description, but an accurate one possibly?
Well, in the same vein, I don't agree with him because there is no disease, there is no malady, there is no cure, there is no solution. It is just an idea in the air so that the country discusses it and resources and time and effort gets involved in it, and we all forget about what else is happening. So there is nothing at all. It is all imaginary.
So if it wasn't an obsession of the Prime Minister's, or as colloquially people tend to say, if it wasn't a bee in his bonnet, this issue wouldn't have come up. There is no need for it. It's simply because the Prime Minister and his office are pushing it that we're here discussing it.
Well, I don't know whether they are the only ones. There may be some other people or institutions or factors behind it. But it certainly seems the Prime Minister and his office are certainly interested in it. That nothing will come out of it, I am quite certain.
Professor Chhokar, thank you very much for the time you've given me, and thank you very much for clarifying the issues that have arisen as a result of the one nation, one election debate, which the audience should be able to fully understand. I thank you for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.